Hey everyone, you're watching Conversations in Pop Culture, and I am your host, Andrew Davis. And this episode is brought to you by my very own t shirt, which is right here. It is making fun of Gundam, Taco Bell, and the most interesting man in the world. And you can pick yours up on Redbubble, as well as you can pick up this bad boy. It is limited to 121 metal cards on my eBay store, so go please check that out. A variety of other my collectibles as well. And if you would like to maintain and protect your comic books, I do have an affiliate code with BCW Supplies. Use Pop Anime Comics to get 10% off your entire order. That includes bags, boards, long boxes, sleeves to protect your cards in, and anything else you could possibly imagine to protect all of your collectibles. And they have everything covered. And so without further ado, and without me boring you with all my sponsors, I have with me comic creator Ben Lacy. So welcome
Hello.
back to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to be here again.
Yes, I don't know if this is 3, 4, or 5.
This
That's
is
the only problem.
times I've been on. I've been on at least twice, so I think it's the third. It may be the fourth, but it's definitely been at least three.
Yes, and we've spoken about the exact same topic, but different issues, and that is Shark of War. And
Right.
you are fully funded on Kickstarter right now. So
Yeah. I'm
congratulations.
over the line and trying to hit stretch goals now, which is pretty good because, of course, as you know, being fully funded and really really covering all your costs are two different numbers, and so I'm getting closer to where I'd really like to be. So.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that because I love talking about the business side of things
Oh,
and
no
all
problem.
that stuff, but I don't want to throw everybody right into the middle of the ocean before we actually talk about what is the basic premise of Shark of War for those who have not heard about it. I know a bunch of people that we're going to be sharing this out to have, so if you want to skip the first 3 minutes of us catching everybody up on what Shark of War is, that's perfectly fine. But for those who are coming into this, and haven't heard of this and this amazing comic, what is the basic premise?
Shark of War is basically Jaws meets RoboCop. It's Jaws if the shark were the hero. It's RoboCop if the cop were a shark. The shark is the main character. He's an escaped military experiment on the loose in the Gulf of Mexico, enforcing the laws he sees fit. Different criminal cartels don't like that because he's very effective and very brutal in dealing with them. So they hire one of his creators to make weapons to stop him, and she does that with a great deal of vigor and comes up with some exciting and cool creatures to send against him.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I like about your book. And this is one of the things that I thoroughly enjoy. And I've read the entire story,
That's great.
and
Thank you.
it's fun. And it is Jaws meets RoboCop. I view it in a very polite way, and hopefully you won't take too much offense to it. But it's that fun B movie that you go to see with your friends and have a blast, and you don't have to think about too much of anything that's going on, and you're there to have fun. And that's something that I feel that comics are supposed to be. We live in a very complicated world, and when I'm reading the book, I'm like, man, this is just fun. I don't have to worry about anything. An explosion can happen. We have a flying shark. And so, what was that like? Because whether that was intentional or not, I view your book as a massive distraction and just something that is fun to read. And I think you really hit on something that I feel more creators need to do. You don't need to change the world per se.
Mm-hmm.
I read comics because I want to be out of this world.
Right. I mean, yeah, I really wanted to make a fun book that did something different in the genre. You know, we've had a lot. There are a lot of shark stories out there. There's probably a movie that comes out every year, or maybe three, and they're all the same thing pretty much. It's a monster shark starts eating people, and the heroes have to kill it. And I decided, well, let's flip that around, and the shark hero is fighting the bad guys and trying to save the day. So I really wanted to thought that would be a fun premise, different than what's done before. You know, if you want, something deeper, in the back I write about, how I think people have gotten too afraid of sharks, and that fear is kind of irrational, and that this is my view of a corrective on that to some degree. But mostly it's supposed to be a fun book that you can enjoy for the action, and hopefully it won't traumatize you like Jaws did a generation of children who are now scared to go to the beach now that they're 50 years old because that's happened. I've encountered that at cons before, where I talk to people about it, and they're like, "Oh, I've been afraid to go in the water since 1974."
Because that's funny to me in a lot of ways, and even going into this, and one of the things that it is a fun book,
Oh,
and there's a lot of fun stuff going on in it, and that's what I like about it is that it's kind of fun to see a badass shark shooting bullets and explosions, but you also have an answer for everything that the shark is doing on a cybernetic level and even a medical level, and how it eats, and then it turns it into fuel, and then how it gets refueled and all that stuff. And that's also really cool too, I think,
thank you.
because it is tight, but it's also that sort of cheesy B movie where I know that, and it's not done like a cheesy B movie, but the concept is so ridiculous that you can't help but, at least I feel that way. And I'm like, man, I got to read this book. This is fun. Like, this is so
thank
out
you.
there, man.
I really appreciate you saying that.
It's kind of like, this is the book I would give my friend. I'd be like, hey, here you go, Shark Award. Knowing it's a joke. And it's like, I don't read comics, and this is the book I would give them. And that's what I think you've really hit, and it's amazing. But at the same time that you did that, you can also read this book on multiple levels.
Yeah, I try to I'm an engineer by training. That's my day job. So, in a lot of the pseudoscience you come into in comic books kind of grates on me because I know better. So even though it is supposed to be over the top and it's purely sci-fi, I try to put in some real, engineering and stuff like that to explain it, as in a way that, makes a little sense. And I'm not just, suddenly having the shark have, laser beam eyes and disintegrator rays and stuff that's way it doesn't make any sense. I'm trying to keep it somewhat grounded so that really, makes it better for the audience so they can suspend disbelief that they're already having to suspend a little easier.
See, I don't have that problem in comics because I'm right now in the middle of reading Sonic the Hedgehog, the IDW. And I've already, when I come into Sonic the Hedgehog, I already surrender about 90% knowing this can't happen. Right. I don't think a hedgehog has a bouncing bracelet and a fire ring and is fighting robots and, is sort of leading the resistance against Eggman. I've come to the conclusion that's not real, but in that world, if I buy in, I'm like, man, this makes sense, and this is the norm. And I think a bunch of people in comics, this is just my opinion, need to really sort of say, hey, look, when I come into Batman or I come into Iron Man, I got to understand that there are rules in this world that are in effect when I enter as a reader.
Right.
Yeah. Everything makes sense.
Yeah, that's I agree in the sense that you got to accept the part that's given, but if Batman suddenly in a Batman comic book suddenly starts teleporting around, you're not going to like that because he's not got that established ability unless he's with the Justice League, and then they can teleport him around in that comic book. But in a regular detective comic book, you don't want to see him, battling Darkseid or anything like that. You want him, and you don't want to see him with super high tech weaponry or the kind of stuff
he can have super high tech weaponry. He's a billionaire. Come on.
Well, you don't want to see him with the like the Justice League level of tech, where it's like stuff that couldn't possibly be made on this earth. You want to see him more grounded and using his fists a lot and not turning into an Iron Man kind of character, which is how when he's with the Justice League, that's what they kind of do sometimes to make it all fit. But in a detective comics, you want him doing detective-y stuff, just a little more than a normal person could do.
Because this sort of leads into something that I think is also fascinating about Shark War and just comics in general, is that understanding your world. Yeah. I don't expect your shark to do certain things to all of a sudden commit a crime, and I don't expect your shark to all of a sudden gather wings because it's a shark. I also don't expect your shark to be in the middle of the Mississippi River either. Right. And I think that's something that people I think some people in comics do it really well and understand that, hey, I can't have this story take place in Mississippi or go to the West Coast per se, but at least in a particular arc, for instance. But I think other people just say screw it, and then it gets really sloppy writing, and they don't know where the world's boundaries are. And I know people love vast worlds, but I feel like your world is somewhat small, but it's still vast. And I think it's a very, very interesting writing style
Well,
and
thank you.
very well written because you understand the realm to play in and you're not pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it, if you remember, I don't know, you probably read early Marvel comic books and stuff or early DC. There's like one superhero and a couple of supervillains. It's not a crowded universe of super people or odd phenomena. It's very much our own world with just these few differences, relatively speaking, at this point. And as the storyline grows and spreads, maybe it'll expand some, but it's basically like those worlds were in their very early days, where we don't have there's no Justice League or equivalent in this universe. There's no Avengers. There's none of all that other stuff. It's our world with these few differences right now. And I do try, like you pointed out, going to the West Coast all of a sudden. If you remember Game of Thrones, for example, the early years were very grounded in how things moved around. And then in the last season, they're like going across the continent like in half a day. All of a sudden, time and space changed completely for that last season or two. And I think that's part of the reason why people kind of were bitter about the ending of that series. Well, there were other reasons too, people acting out of character, but some of the realism just seeped away.
Yeah, and I think that's also a big problem that sometimes and I'm sure you've read it, where somebody's got a great concept for a book,
Mm-hmm.
and then they go and they start writing it, and in the second, third issue, they're like, oh man, this is good. And then by the fourth or fifth issue, they don't know how to either end the story, or they get sloppy, or they know that they're now trying to make money off of it, or money's drying up, or it's
Right.
not as popular, or whatever happens, or as I stated, they just don't know how to end it, or they're trying to figure out how to position it, or they have another idea, and then that other idea sort of takes over their life, and they're like, well, I got to end this story. And that's fascinating to me because you haven't made a decision to end Shark of War.
No,
Yeah.
I very much wanted to make sure I had a 5-issue arc in all planned out at the very beginning. And so that was 2 years ago, a little over 2 years now, that the first issue came out. So probably 3 years altogether. And I very much wanted to deliver the full storyline. Now we're hitting kind of a break point where we'll see where it goes next. I'm planning to do something with the survivors of issue 5. To follow their arc and follow up, and I had that pretty much plotted out for a full storyline too. Because I don't like it when, and now we're going to go back to Game of Thrones, because George R. Martin infamously has still not delivered the next novel, which is kind of why the part of the reason the show fell off is because they started working from their own stuff and they didn't have his stuff anymore.
So to even talk about that, because this is fascinating. There's a concept when you need to know when to end something and say, look, I've had a run. I understand that I've built out my IP. I've invested the money into the IP. I've protected the IP. I understand this world is vast, but there's a concept we're saying, look, enough is enough, because it's the idea. And I go back to Seinfeld, and Seinfeld was a little bit, before my time. I'm 29,
Mm-hmm.
but Jerry made the determination to say, I want to go out on top. And that's a very different decision. I think, Jim Parsons from Big Bang, after 12 seasons of Big Bang, he said, I'm done. And well, you can't have Big Bang without Sheldon. And I think it's very important to understand, I've hit the idea. If we can keep going, it's not a money issue,
Right.
but I don't know if issue 6 or season 13 or season 10 is going to be better than where we're at right now. And we've had a run with it. And I think that's something that I think is very respectable when somebody understands saying, look, I know it's time to end this and end it strong. And also on an economic level, as well as say, hey, look, this is preserved. And if it's 5 issues, you know, I could still sell it as 5 issues. I could sell it in a trade paperback, but also
I'm hoping to do that at some point.
So what is that like for you? Because it's I would imagine it's a very difficult thing for a creator.
Well, at this point, you know, I still have, you know, more stories planned for that universe. But yeah, I think there's a point where, you know, first off, any story I start, I'm going to finish it. So if I do an issue of a comic book that's a continuing storyline, I'm very determined to finish it. That's why, Shark War has done well, but I could have switched on. There were times when I was tempted to switch on to something else, but I'm like, no, I've got people reading this. I'm going to finish it and finish it strong for them, and we'll see where I go next with what I want to do. But I think as a creator, you have an obligation to give a finished story. But yeah, you don't want to keep going on too long. There's a number of shows on TV that I think, I like them the first 4 seasons, but now they need to wrap it up. And Seinfeld and Big Bang and stuff, obviously they could go quite a ways. I think Big Bang probably that was the time to end it, at the latest. I don't know if that show should have gone on longer than that. Same with Friends and, Seinfeld. Like I was around during that time when Seinfeld was on, and the last year or so, I was like, I'm not really enjoying that this much anymore. So I thought they made the right decision, but they left a lot of money on the table because apparently, they interviewed one of those guys, and he was like, they offered us a ridiculous amount of money to keep doing it, and we said no.
Yeah, because I would imagine, and I'm in the fortunate position where I could do this for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
And because every episode's different, and the format's not different, but an interview, like I can run conversations in pop culture for the next 20 years, and I don't think it's going to get stale. And I could also change up my interviews. I could add more sectors in where I could add music. I could add, other things in. I could add filmmakers in, and I could switch up the entire show, or I could mix it up and do a year where I do 90 cosplayers and 30 wrestlers and 60 comic people to mix it up.
Right.
But I also understand that there's going to get a point where it's time to say, I'm done. And there's going to get a point, but I don't think that point's coming for a while. But I would imagine, I find it fascinating because I know people, and I don't think my friend Ed Davis is going to mind, but he's going long on the Immortal era. And it's kind of like, and I respect somebody saying, I want to do 30, 40, 50 issues. But at the same time, that is a big undertaking, and it's a big risk as well on an economic level.
Yeah, 30 or 40 is a long time, especially for an indie comic. I think there's only a handful of indie comics that have gone 30 or 40 issues, if that's what you mean.
And so I just find that entire thing fascinating because I haven't created a comic yet. And
yeah,
I might be the exception, because if I create a world and I've spent money and I've built the Bible for that world and I've developed it, it's going to be hard for me not to want to keep playing in it. And that's my whole thing. And that's why I'm so fascinated, because I haven't done that yet. So for me as an interviewer, I don't even know what I think, how I would do 5 issues. Am I going to say, we accomplished what we wanted to accomplish and we move on? So that's why this is so interesting to me.
Right.
But I digress, because this is not about me. It's about you. So, and I do want to talk a little bit about issue 5.
Okay,
so
sure.
Obviously, just to catch everybody up, issues 1 and 2 sort of set up Ganasher, and then issue 3, he kind of gets his ass kicked a little bit, I think is a nice way to put it. Issue 4, he gets upgraded massively. And then issue 5 is the showdown.
Right.
Between basically the cartel, the evil creator who's now with the cartel, and this is where we're at, and we got flying piranhas and sharks flying and a variety of other things, and we got the girl and her new boy toy is in this.
Yeah, I've been kind of setting up the subplot. You know, I want to have interesting human characters too. You know, a lot of these kind of stories, you've got the monsters interesting, and everybody else is kind of cardboard. So I put some time into hopefully making, you know, the human characters, you know, the villains, you know, really cool, and the supporting cast, you know, of his, you know, sympathetic and interesting. So yeah, I kind of set up, you know, where there's some relationship stuff and some other stuff going on that's a little on the side, but you know, they're there to give a human interest to it.
Because it is very interesting, because obviously, and I've read it, and I'm not going to spoil anything, so I just want to let everybody know that that's not what we do on this show. But there are consequences in this issue. This
Right.
is not. I don't think it's not a happy ending, but it's not a happy ending like, oh, everything's good and they're all going
Yeah.
out for a picnic. You know, clearly things happen
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
issue.
There's a lot of struggle, and you know, everything's not, you know, like I said, there's survivors and there are victims, and you know, people who don't make it to the end of the arc, and you know, and there's clearly the possibility of a further story. In fact, you know, the villains are not, you know, at all defeated. In some ways, they may even be better off now, and in a few ways, which I think we'll see with them later, maybe in future issues.
Because and that's fascinating too, because it does end it. And if you say, hey, I wanted to a different book, like Pigs of War, for instance, hey, we're not a discriminating company here. We make war out of every animal.
Well, I actually, that's the reason I laughed at it is because I actually made a point about that, called Pigs of War, in one of my recent updates, because I was doing a little reading up on, you know, efforts to do, a lot of the story involves, you know, the shark being integrated with artificial intelligence. And as it turns out, Elon Musk has a company called Neuralink, which actually implanted a chip into a pig's brain to monitor the pig's brain. So I sent out an email calling it Pig of War, because it's the very preliminary start of the concept Shark of War is doing. Because like I said, I always like to have a science feature at the back of my digital editions to of what's going on in the real world with this, how it could relate to real stuff.
It's fascinating, and obviously I read that update, and I was on your newsletter, so sorry, that's why I brought
Oh,
it up.
okay.
I thought it was hilarious. It actually made me open up. I'm like, Pigs of War, that's kind of a funny heading
Yeah.
for an email. Otherwise, I delete most emails that people send me.
Right.
I delete most Kickstarter updates because I actually have a life and I'm busy.
Yeah, I do too. If you want to know the truth, I support what I support, and then I don't read about it much later.
I don't care about your updates. I don't. I
Yeah.
legitimately don't care, because once I back something, I could give two F's about it.
Right.
Because guess what? I'm going to get it. You're not going to
Yeah.
give me any information that I need unless I'm interviewing you and then I'm
Right.
paying attention, which makes sense because I'm self-serving my interests. But I thought it was kind of funny, and pigs are fascinating. Pigs are one of the smartest animals ever. Like,
Right.
they know when things are going on, and they could sniff things out, and they're a very, very, very fascinating animal. So very cool, and I'm actually excited for Pigs of War now. If you actually do it, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be absolutely great. And then following that, you should Crows of War, because crows are also a fascinating animal.
Well, for now, I think we're going to be sticking with aquatic creatures mainly, but I am doing a spin-off and that got accepted into another publisher's anthology where the villain of this story is trying to make another creature. It's a little short story. I think it'll be pretty cool, and then there's going to be some other spin-offs too, like we've talked about before.
So let's even talk about that, because obviously I don't want to push the anthology thing, because I don't want to
Yeah,
ruin it or take something out of somebody's control per se, for them
right.
announcing it, even though we might have just ruined it. But we're not going to mention too
I've
much.
been told I could share that I was doing it. I've even shared. I think I've shared the first page and a couple of updates before that to it. And I think that's going to actually launch probably. Sadly, it's going to launch after my Kickstarter's over. I was hoping they'd both be going on at the same time, but I think it'll be right after.
But even the spin-offs, because obviously there's a lot of water in the world, in case you didn't know. I'm
Yeah.
letting everybody know. Breaking news here, guys. Breaking news. But obviously this is in the Gulf. You could
Hmm.
have something more up north, technically. You could have something in the UK zone. You could have something in the Indian Ocean. You could have something in the Red Sea, for instance. You could have something on the West Coast, or you could even have something. I don't know what exactly. You got the Gulf, and I don't know what that body of water is. That's sort of on the other side of Mexico, I guess. But not California per se.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of places that you could do stuff. You could have something up in the Arctic for all you want. And so what is that like, knowing that you got a lot of abilities to play with water and other sharks and cousins or other creatures, or maybe this shark has a good time somewhere and meets a lovely lady shark, you know?
I I had thought of a short story where he winds up going to Australia, but mostly the storyline's been taking place from South America up the through the Gulf of Mexico, up on the eastern coast of the United States, because that's where that's the operating zone kind of his enemy, his main enemy at this point. But yeah, there's always the potential to expand it out further. Like I said, I'm looking for spin-off stories. I think the next spinoff will be set in the Caribbean or warmer waters too, just because that's where the characters are, because they're related to the characters in this story.
Yeah, because obviously, because the world's built at this point, and
Right,
that's the thing what makes it easier. And then you can introduce a new shark or a new bunch of characters, and then you have familiarity
right.
along with new things, and then you're building outward. It's almost I can't think of something. Avatar: The Last Airbender is a great example of that,
Oh
where
yeah, that moved around all over the place. That was a pretty good story in that
And the reason
direction.
why I bring this up is that I am very comfortable with Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'm comfortable with Korra, and then I'm comfortable with the Kyoshi books.
Oh,
And we're going back 400 years. Then we go to Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is the main, and
hmm,
then we go 65 to 70 years in the future.
right.
But the world's rules have slightly evolved
Hmm,
throughout those 500 years, give or take, or those 700 years.
right.
But the fact that there's four vendor classes, the fact that the map of the world hasn't changed dramatically,
Right.
is very helpful. And so that's something that I think is going to be very beneficial to this,
Hmm.
where I understand that there's a bunch of rules in this. And we go back to the idea that I come into this knowing that a shark has guns on it. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I'm actually looking forward to your spinoffs.
Oh, thank you. I hope other people are too. I've got a small audience, and I have to retain them.
So I actually have a question about small audiences, because I've been having this discussion, and I don't have a large audience,
Hmm.
but I have a strong audience,
Yeah.
and my audience actually uses my sponsorships.
Oh, that's good.
And I've heard the whole concept, and I've heard you need a large audience, or it's almost like you need 1,000 people all paying you $100 every single month, and then you have a legitimate business,
Right.
because, or you need a bunch of people paying you a smaller amounts of money. So you might need 10,000 people paying you $10 a month, or if you have 100 people paying you $100 a month, it's the same amount of money.
Yeah.
And so, what is that for you in knowing that, hey, people who like sharks really like this stuff? And because we hear this debate all the time on Kickstarter, and not to get too controversial, but I don't know who's right on this debate, whether you need 500 backers or maybe you only need 100 backers really throwing down real money on your book. And I think it's a tricky debate, because there's no right answer, I feel. But at the same time, people think there is.
Well, I think if you're trying to make a living on this, you need enough backers to make a living. I'm not trying to make a living on this at this point. This is a side hustle kind of thing that I like to do because I like to do it. I'm passionate about it. But I have a day job, so I'm not relying on the money for this. So what I need is enough backers to, hopefully to not be in the red and to have, be able to do a quality project and to afford the side stuff. And also, I want, my longer term goal is to have, readers for future books. So I want to have more and more readers. I'm really, my personal desire is I would rather have a bunch of a whole lot of readers paying a small amount of money, simply because in the long term, I think that's a better way to go, is to have a lot, if you want to have your works out there and enjoyed by people, and if that's what you're really into, and I want to have people enjoying my stuff, I want more of them. Yeah, if they're paying, the minimal amount, my Kickstarter thing is, as low as $5 for the digital issue, and a whole bunch of other bonuses that come with it. That's fine. If I had thousands of them, I'd be ecstatic. It'd be cool to have, 100 people paying $1,000 each, but, my personal desire would be to have thousands of people paying, $5 each, and that would be great.
So I'm sure you're familiar with manga, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this had Sam Quinlan on, and you could go watch that interview. We were speaking about this, and we were actually talking about how much manga is sold for. And
right.
I don't know if you've been in a Barnes and Noble or even Amazon or another bookstore, but a copy of Dragon Ball Z, and I don't know if Dragon Ball Z is still in Barnes and Noble, but maybe Super is. So it's like $10 for 200 pages, and manga is massively cheap. And I'm curious how you feel about this, where one of the problems that I think is happening is, I think there's two main problems in comics right now. It's people can't get fast enough for their readers, which is a money problem and an art team problem. And then secondly, on Kickstarter, it's like $10 to $12 for your single physical copy is really, really expensive. Mm-hmm. And I understand that there's not an answer to that per se. It's very hard to get your costs down.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of locked in because of, shipping alone, that alone, packaging and shipping, even at the, media mail rates, that's going to be, $4 or $5 just off the top, just to, not even counting your time and everything else to pack it up.
It's also the idea that printing, to get down to 85 cents a book, you need to print like 4,000 copies.
Yeah, you have to do offset printing, and I don't, in a large quantity, I don't do that at this point. I've toyed a couple of times with, it's, people talk about manga being cheaper. It's important to note that they're printing on newsprint. It's black and white.
Well, I'm talking about like the nice bound books in Barnes and Noble are $10.
Yeah, but they're still not color, and they're more of a newsprint style paper. They've got a nice cover on them, but the last one I read was One Punch Man, and it was nice cover, but the interior was pretty similar to newsprint, and it wasn't glossy, and it was black and white. I've toyed with the idea of trying, should I go black and white paper newsprint, and you could probably print the books cheaper. A lot of our costs as indie creators is not necessarily all locked up and wouldn't all go away, but you probably could get a bit cheaper by going that route, obviously. But I think at this point, people in the indie comic space expect, a comic book. They don't expect, a manga book. But I wouldn't be opposed to doing that if that was the better way to go. But I think that's part of the reason they're able to do it cheaper, is they're not doing a comic book, style. They're doing, something else, which works well for them. But, and at their production rates also, their costs are really cheap. So
it's the idea that in Japan, manga is viewed differently, where it's very disposable. Also, if chapter 57 of One Piece or One Punch Man is
Mhm.
selling out 6 months later, they're just going to keep printing it
Right.
because why wouldn't you? And that's why you have huge manga sales versus with, issue 57 of Batman, it's not going to be reprinted, 6 months later. I mean, maybe it will be if it's a massive key issue and there's actually a significant reason to do it, but it's very rare.
Well, they'll
And it's
roll it into it. They'll roll 5 or 6 issues into a trade paperback, and they'll publish that for 15 or 16 bucks, which is competitive if you think about it with manga, because you're getting a larger size edition, and it's color on better paper. So I don't know if it's totally fair to compare floppies, U.S. floppies with manga tankobons, and instead of U.S. trade paperbacks, with their tankobons, which are collections, so that they I think the price value ratio looks a little better. Um, like I said, I'm not opposed to going black and white in newsprint. I don't know. I guess it's just comic book readers don't expect that at this point. Um, there's always that talk about, well, gee, American comic books should be more like manga, but then I'm not sure that people would be happy if suddenly Spider-Man was black and white like an I'm sure you're familiar with alternate comic books, for example.
yeah.
They're in color too, and they sell for $1.99 or two. They sell well less than what Marvel or DC does, and I think he does an okay business, but he's not conquering Marvel or taking over from Marvel either with his books.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because me and Sam, and I was curious your opinion on this, is that in comics, we need to look at what's working in manga,
Right.
and we also need to look at what's not working in manga. And I actually don't think, this is just my opinion, and obviously I buy and sell comic books on eBay, and so I'm very much in the variant space, and I'm
Right.
very in the exclusivity space. And so and I do well with it. And one of the things that I'm looking at is I'm saying, okay, how do I identify trends? How do I identify positions? And at some point, I'm going to write a comic book, and I want to make sure that I take every advantage. So if I know ABC works in manga and E, F, and G work in comics, I want to combine both of those things. And I
Right.
feel that people aren't having these healthy discussions about these issues and saying, how do we take what's working? Because a manga like One Piece can sell 150 million copies.
Yeah.
And comics haven't figured out how to do that yet. And that's a problem. And I don't have the answer to that problem, but whoever finds that answer, you're going to become a trillionaire very, very quickly. Very quickly. And you're going to be having more money than you know what to do with because you're going to solve every problem. And then it's just throw gasoline on a fire.
Yeah, well, I think it really helps. I think manga. I don't read enough manga. I read a little to have an expert opinion on it. But a few things you can see is it, like One Punch Man, for example. It's the same writer and artist on all 24 of the current volumes out now. So it's one guy's vision. It's a continuing story of that vision. I don't know if that's
Also
true.
weekly. It's weekly, which is helpful.
Yeah, it comes out frequently. So I think that's a continuing story on that kind of level is really helping him. I hope I'm not too frozen here. My own face is not. I'm not seeing my own face move on the screen. Yeah, I think it helps them that they come out regularly. They have one continuing story, the same creative team. I mean, I can imagine, if you look at like Spider-Man, Stan Lee and Ditko, and then John Romita Sr. for 100 issues, so that gave a continuity to that story, that if Stan Lee was still alive and still capable of writing Spider-Man, and he was still writing it, people would probably still be buying it in significant quantities, more than when in the 90s and 80s, Spider-Man was selling 500,000 copies or so a month, instead of or 100,000 now is probably a good month. So if they had that kind of continuity, and instead of like a new creative team. The arcs change. It's not a continuing drive. I think that hurts. And you hear, we can get in debates about some of the arguments about how comics today are. The story isn't, the story has gotten too politically correct or things like that. For some people, and it doesn't focus on the action and.
Yeah, so I also think with comics, even taking all the PC, and I don't want to dive into that debate today, but I also think it's the idea that comics are massively confusing where you start. Every 2 years, you got a reboot, and it's kind of like, where do I start? Spider-Gwen has a book, and then 30 issues later, she gets a reboot, and half of what happened in the first thing, so issues 1 through 15 are canon, and then issue 1 of volume 3 of Spider-Gwen picks up where issue 15 ended, but there's also 15 issues that are left high and dry. And then I'm confused as a reader, and I think that doesn't help. So then I go into Barnes & Noble, and I'm looking at the trade paperback, and I'm like, Spider-Gwen, volume 1. Spider-Gwen, volume 1, Tale 1, or whatever it's called. Yeah. And then I see volume 2, and then I see volume 3, 1 through 7 or 1 through 17 through 25. And I'm like, what the hell am I reading here? And then you don't know what's going on. And so I don't think that helps.
No, I think for a while they were doing, like with Spider-Man, they were doing a pretty good job on the trade paperbacks of, making a collection and numbering them and ordering them. So if you read for the trades and didn't buy the floppies, you could follow the continuing story pretty well. But I think a lot of that's broken down too. They're probably, they seem to be doing a ton of comic books with different characters and, probably more than they should. Marvel at their height had 15 titles back in the good old, the golden age of Marvel in the 70s or so.
In 2015, DC had 94
Yeah,
titles.
I've heard that, and that's just way too much probably.
That's
it too.
7 years ago. That's 7 years ago. Yeah. We're not talking 70 years ago. We're not talking 20 years ago. We're talking 7. We're talking. I'm trying to do the math, and we're talking 84 months ago.
Right.
That's not a lot of time.
Yeah, that's a lot of comic books, and people, that was the other thing when with the integrated universe, back in the 90s and in 80s, when that kind of became popular and everything was kind of tied together, you didn't have too many comics to read. Now nobody can read all of DC comic books, and nobody's going to want to.
I don't want to read everything.
So yeah, I think there is a good argument to be made that they're probably printing too much, and they should just be focusing on the important few. But that's what what the indie creator can do. I'm focusing on one, hopefully maybe 2 books that could be running at a time, with one vision behind them. So that's something you just aren't going to get from Marvel and DC anymore. But you do get from manga. Like I said, if I started selling, the 100,000 copies a week that One Piece does, I'd probably be able to drop my prices and get into, my distribution wouldn't be me shipping it to you by hand. So, my prices could come down, and I could do more. Focus on that, just focusing on the creative end too.
It's for me, I'll be very honest. So, my prices as a business with guaranteed guest spots and everything would come down if I was doing 10,000, plays every episode, because then my sponsors would pick it up. And unfortunately, that's why my prices were what they were on my Kickstarter.
Right.
And it's a guaranteed spot. And what that means, because I also have to be selective now.
Right.
You got to bring me something into the show. It's money, clout, or respect, or it's bringing me access to someone.
Right.
And that's how you get on my show now. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have access to people, or you don't have an audience or clout or something that makes somebody stop, then money is your answer. And I'm very honest about it.
Yeah.
Because, and before anybody attacks me when they see this, the reason why I bring this up is because this is a business. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with building out a company. Right. With you got to pay your art team. You got to print the book. even if you say I'm doing this as a hobby because I want to do comics, well, if you're saying my Kickstarter's whole purpose is just for printing, well, you still got to print the book. And that's the whole thing. And I think that's something that where people don't understand is that I'm not asking money for a cash grab. I'm asking for money because, well, I want to fund my show. And that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I don't
And
think most people on Kickstarter, there are people on Kickstarter who are making a living on it, and some people are making a good living on it, but I think most people, and are doing it as a passion project, and the money they're trying to raise is almost certainly all going to the business. So if I do really well on this Kickstarter, the money's going to roll over to the next comic book, and because I'm wanting to upgrade my art team and do more writing and less of the art myself, for example. So that
I'm going to ask you a question, and you don't have numbers, but how much of this money is essentially gone? And what I mean by that on your Kickstarter, and I'll preface the question with my Kickstarter. Um, right now I have $400, give or take, left on $855.
Right.
That is around, and by August I'm going to be down to 200, or no, I'm going to be down to like 160.
Right.
And you might say, wow, $855, it doesn't go that far because it covered my metal cards and my postcards. Kickstarter took 8 to 10%, and then I paid for Hootsuite and my StreamYard. And then I have money basically for my podcast hosting and for StreamYard for the next 12 months in August. That's what's left, and I am actually probably running a negative.
Right.
And so I'm not making any money from my Kickstarter. My Kickstarter, technically, I'm running at a negative 100 position, but I had corporate sponsors. If I didn't have corporate sponsors and other things of that nature and some live reads, then my Kickstarter goal would have been 1,000. The reason why it was 750 is because I had those corporate sponsors that are eating up some of the fat. So I think that's some people don't understand. And when I speak to people, they're like, I know to the exact dollar that I'm going to make or lose on my Kickstarter. And so I'm pretty sure you know that number. Exactly.
I have a pretty good idea. My goal is usually will just cover my printing. If I hit my goal, I'll cover my printing and shipping costs, and then I still have my letterer, my costs for my letterer, my costs for my for my all the extras that I usually have, bookmarks and prints and other stuff, and so I'm all that is well over totals up well over my goal. Now, if I made, if I started hitting the 2,000 to 3,000 range, that would start covering the artists that I want to bring in for the next issue. Not even counting, right now I'm bringing in artists for other covers, so I have variant covers, and that gets paid. So for my next Kickstarter, which, like I said, I plan on having another artist do most of the work. My goal is going to be at least double, maybe triple, because I just want to be able to pay for at least the art, most of the art, and most of the printing. And then, if I do beyond that, or if I have extra books to sell at cons, that's where I'll make some money. But even that's, cons are not like, a big business. They're a source for me to try and get more fans more than anything else, and to sell my books.
That's interesting. And then we're going to dive into covers, but I'm actually curious because obviously we spoke about this, but I am digitalization pivot 2.0. That doesn't mean digital comics. That means I want to sell more online. I want to sell directly to my customer. I want a bigger social footprint, and I want to convert. This show is a complete result of COVID. And even me kicking up my eBay business has been a result of COVID because I can sell directly to my consumer. Right. And I want to sell you physical goods. I just want to use places like Facebook, eBay, Instagram Market, Shopify stores, Amazon, whatever you want to use, live streams, Twitch, YouTube, whatever it be. And I'm of the nature and I'm of the technology where, and people disagree with me in the comic world, where I don't think cons are where you really should make your sales. I think cons can do you good, and they could be a nice bonus, and they can help convert fans over. But you also have to spend $250 for a table or $500 for a table, and there's expenditures. You got to be at the con.
Right.
If the con's not in your state, you have to stay in a hotel. And I've heard people say I do really well at cons, but I'm like, look, I mean, just today, in the last 4 days on eBay, I did $700 without me having to do much work. I mean, that entire work with those items took like half an hour. And so, and I didn't have to see anybody, and I got to stay in my house.
Yeah.
And so that's how I view it. And I'm curious how you feel about that, because again, I don't have my own book. And maybe if I had my own comic, I'd be having a different opinion. But I also have my eBay store and I'm selling my own metal cards. And I want to sell directly to my consumer. And I'm like, here's my metal card, guys. Go buy it in my eBay store. And that's kind of use this platform and Facebook and a variety of other places to sell that metal card.
You know, I have an online store, and you know, I pitch it to my newsletter and stuff like that. But you know, most of my online sales are through the Kickstarter, where I can drive people to relatively easier. You know, I try to get, you know, I find that, you know, selling independent comic books online through ads and, you know, non Kickstarter stuff very hard. You know, I think you have to get those people in your audience somehow, and before you can sell to them, you aren't just going to put a Facebook ad with your comic book and they're going to go to your store and buy it. At least that's, I haven't had much luck doing that.
I also think with me, and sorry to interrupt, I play with Zenescope books. So if your indie comic has Paul Green on the cover, my audience is built in on my eBay store.
Right.
So if I go, and that's the other thing too, is that everybody has an audience. So all of a sudden, the reason why somebody buys, and I've had indie books that I picked up on a retail package that were similar to a Zenescope thing, and the person is not a fan of said indie book, but they like a particular artist or they like a particular thing. And so as a business, I'm making decisions based on that, because I know that if I put A next to B, B is going to sell. It's kind of like if you put ice cream next to the cones that you put your ice cream in, you know, you're going to sell ice cream cones.
Right.
Because, well, those two items work well together. Or you put, you know, whipped cream in next to the ice cream section, it's pretty likely you're going to sell things because they work together. Or if you put milk next to the chocolate chip cookies, you know, it works, right? So
yeah, well, that's the advantage of a con for me, is because then you're getting an audience that's you can actually, you know, first off, you can hit them up, buttonhole them, which it's hard to do online through all the clutter unless you have a large ad budget for doing that kind of stuff, which I don't. Or you're a name, you know, like someone like Brandon Sanderson, who can, you know, say, hey, I'm going to have you know, I'm going to have these books on Kickstarter, and everybody's going to cover it, and you know, thousands of people will go and purchase it. But when you don't have that, going to a con, you've got people who are at least somewhat disposed to the idea of comic books. So that alone there, you know, you're getting into your core audience. Though, you know, to my surprise, when I first started doing cons, I thought everybody would be disposed to comic books. And when I went to the con, I was surprised that there are a lot of people who don't care about comic books at a Comic-Con, which but there are some. So that gets you to the people who might be interested. And then if you can convert them, you know, to buy something, they'll get on your email list, and now you've got them online. You know, I've had people who've, you know, saw my stuff at cons who've actually gone now and backed my Kickstarters. Of course, some degrees it's a different audience, because people at cons are like, you know, I'll pay $5 for a comic book, but they're not, when they see it on a Kickstarter, you know, and they had shipping costs in, and then it's suddenly not as easy. But there have been, you know, and you know, I'm grateful for it. There've been a number of people who've seen me at cons and decided to back my books on Kickstarter too, which is great. And also, you know, I can make a little side money, because I've just, you know, I've learned at cons that there are other things that sell. You know, about 40%, 30 to 40% of my sales now is in, you know, plushy toys. to kids, because they want something. They're not interested in comic books, but the idea of a little stuffed shark is really appealing, and I can sell that at a pretty good rate at a con that's
Also,
affordable.
it's also the idea that Dad brings Sally and Johnny to the con,
Right.
and Dad's a comic book fan, and he's like, "Yo, go to the Comic Con. It'll be fun. It'll be wholesome. It'll
Yeah.
be a fun thing." And maybe there's nothing that Johnny gets a book, Sally gets a book, but then they see this right here, like, "Oh, I love the shark," right?
Yeah.
And they love this right here is a good example,
Yeah.
and that helps.
Oh yeah, yeah. I can definitely get some people. You okay? I can get some people. You mostly it's two separate audiences. The people, there's a few times I've had people buy both comic books and stuffed animals, but usually it's one or the other. The parents are, a lot of the parents are there for the toys, or to meet the wrestler, and then they have a small kid with them who's like, oh, I get a stuffed shark, and my smallest stuffed shark is $5, which at a con is a pretty good, that's a pretty good price to, a very affordable price for somebody to get a toy that they can have and that they'd like. That's very affordable rate. You're not going to find much else at a con that's less than that. And then obviously I have more expensive stuff. Like now I'm bringing in the big boy to sell at these things.
No, because it's tricky, and again, I play in the eBay realm, and I deal with high end merchandise for a reason.
Right.
And I like the margins a little too much. I like I buy a book for $20 and I sell it for $60 to $70.
Yeah.
Or I buy a Pop Funko for $15 and I sell it for $180. I love
That's
those margins.
really good.
I mean, on a 2-year hold time, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, guys. I just sold a big My Hero Academia, my Dobby from My Hero Academia, that Pop Funko, and I have one for myself, and I don't have any more, so don't hit me up for it. The guy who got it, I'm not going to tell you where he lives, so you're not going to go bother him either. You're not going to be able to intercept the package, is all I'm going to say on that point. But yeah, no, I find that con economics are fascinating.
Right.
And if I was to go back and do college all over again, I would get my degree in economics, and I would want to study con economics because I think that's such an interesting, and that's what would be my thesis.
Yeah, I do have, I have an advantage, a little bit of an advantage in that I can get an artist alley table for less than a vendor table. So if the con is in driving distance to my house, a lot of them one day, if I can get it for, $50 for a table, that works out pretty well. If I have to drive down, like, when we did this, I did the Savannah Con last year, and basically I made that a vacation. My wife came down, we stayed there, and we went to the beach afterwards in Savannah because at that the price of the hotel and then the price of the con, the table fee at the con, you're not going to make money on that because that's an expensive area to take a hotel to. But I'm willing to drive a couple hours from my house to go to a con. But once you're starting to get 4 or 5 hours away, the economics don't work very well.
That's one of the things where I will only do cons because I used to be a panelist and not paid, but I'll get a free ticket. And it helps. It helps. And I can go to a con when I used to live in DC, where I would take an Uber or the Metro to the con, and very helpful because I don't have to stay in a hotel, and there's expenses, but all of a sudden, if I'm not paying for a $70 ticket and my mom or my dad come and they're not paying for that ticket either, that's helpful because it's cash equivalencies. But again, if a con wants me, says, hey, Andrew, we want you to talk about comic book investing, but it's in Kentucky or it's even in New York, and you want me to be there for 2 days, you got to pay me. And you got to pay for my hotel. You got to pay for my food because it's my time, because I can't afford it. It doesn't work in my business model.
Yeah, One of the cover artists I use on the wall behind me. I don't know if you can see it either. It's the pretty girl in the lower right, lower left. Sorry.
We could put you full screen. That'll help everybody.
So the yeah, kind of. Let's see that cover right there. The guy who did that cover there, Greg Bo Watson. He's
coming on the 12th. He's coming on the 12th.
Yeah, he's popular enough that not only does he get invites to he gets the free con table for free, but sometimes they'll pay for his hotel and stuff too. And that's my dream, is that I become popular enough that I have these con organizers not only give me the table for free, but actually pay for my hotel. That's when I would know I made it as a comic book guy.
I mean, I'll be very honest. At this stage, I have so much knowledge on comic book investing and even the basic skill level that I will not give my knowledge away on that for free. I'll give my knowledge away on podcasting for free.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people, and that's an ethics position for me, because I feel people screw people on that all the time. But when it comes to comic book investing, I understand how valuable my information is. And so I'm not doing that for free. And I'll openly say to a con, on a business level, and the way I'll phrase it is that I am creating a business around this. If I give this away for free, it hurts my business level. Here's my red flags. And if they don't want it, that's fine. And that's perfectly fine. And everything else, if I'm talking about Tezuka or I'm talking about how to create a podcast, I don't mind giving away that for free. But I also understand how valuable that information is, because I legitimately can change and make somebody on Friday make them money by Sunday at a con. And with knowledge, and I can give somebody the basics so that they understand what to buy and what not to buy, and even how to function at a con in 45 minutes or less, that they actually have an opportunity to make real money and change their entire perspective on thinking. And I've come to the conclusion that I have a very unique skill set, and my eBay business has proven that right now. So I'm at that stage where I'm not giving things away for free, but at the same time, there's other knowledge, like how to podcast. No problem talking about that for free. So, that's where I'm at. And if a con disagrees, that's their prerogative and they're right. But I also have the right to say, look, I know what I'm worth. I'm sorry. If you don't see what I'm worth, that's your problem.
Yeah, well, in my case, it's more that they bring in guests, because they think they'll bring in a named guest would bring in people, fans. So popular creators get that kind of deal. And like I said, that's kind of my dream is to get that kind of deal, because I'd like to do that. That'd be a lot of fun.
See, I don't even want that type of deal. I just want to be paid. I don't need no problem. I don't have a clout problem. I don't have any problems with the fact that I want to be paid. And I'm at the stage where I'm 29 now, and I have the attitude that I want to be paid. And I have skill sets that I feel that entitle me to be paid. And people can disagree with me. That's fine. I have no problem with disagreement. But that's how I feel. And on particular things, I am very adamant about it. And that's where we're at. And what I find in my life is that if you treat yourself a certain way and you demand a certain thing, you know what it is? And then you ask for justifications.
Yeah.
It's very hard. And I don't ask for justifications over emails. I ask for justification in person, because in person, it's hard to say no. And I know when somebody's all squirmish. I know when a con director does not want to speak to you because they know it's not going to be a fun conversation. Fuck. And because nobody wants to say no. Nobody wants to create a bad situation. And also, I am extremely punitive, where if I say what I'm going to do and you deny me when I tell you I'm the best, and then a year later I prove that I'm the best, my rate doesn't double, it triples. I'm punitive and purposely. So I got no problem admitting it. Wow. I know exactly who I am, and it's fine if people don't like that.
Right.
I didn't get to this stage in my life by being nice. But anyway, I digress. I got to this stage by being a bulldog and not letting go.
Mhm.
That's how I got here. But anyway, I do want to talk about covers because you got a bunch of rewards. The digital issue of issue 5. You got the digital catch-up. You also got the digital plus deluxe edition catch-up. You got the physical issues of issue 5. And then we get to all the fun stuff here. So that's one of the covers.
That's the base cover.
And we got Jaws.
Yeah, I always do a Jaws cover. Normally, I've been doing the original spin on the Jaws movie poster, the original. This time, I got tired of it, and I said I'm going to do the Jaws 2 movie poster, which is in this case the villainous water skiing away from the shark, which is basically Jaws 2's movie poster. So I wanted to do that.
Yeah, well, I like girls in bikinis, so I like that cover. Then you got JC Grande.
Yeah, he does very striking art. Very, I really liked his action. And he did this black and white Jaws tribute cover. I liked it so much. He'd done it for something else, and I asked him if I could buy it from him so I could use it as a cover. So I that's how that came out. This is the other cover for me. He did. Again, the villainess of the story, confronting the shark with her piranha at the ready, and him crashing in. I thought, again, I really like how JC Grande does action. When something's attacking, you really feel the attack almost in his artwork.
And then this is the cover that I said to you is where you should post it everywhere.
Yeah, I've been posting a lot. This is Eduardo Guzman Wilson. He does really nice work, and he does really nice work drawing attractive women, which is kind of what you get here. You get a shark, and you get attractive women. I'm actually, he gave me a just the shark image and just the woman image, and I've been sharing those around. And I'm going to actually make a magnet out of the shark image because it came out so cool that he gave me as a second image.
I'm not gonna lie, I just want the magnet of the woman. Screw the shark.
Well, I mean, I'm selling that probably wouldn't be a bad idea, but I'm selling the shark at this point. Like I said, for my spinoff, I do have a plan for more attractive, focused more on women heroines, and there will definitely be a magnet with women on it.
Because I definitely like this cover, and I said it to you.
Oh yeah, it's very good. Yeah, we had it was an interesting iteration because his first shot at it, the woman didn't look. He didn't draw her attractive, and I was like, I wanted to look like, I showed him, I pointed out one of his other artworks, and I said I wanted to look a little more like this, and he's like, oh, okay, now I see what you want, and he started reworking it, and he came back, and it was way better, and like I said, I think this came out really good.
Because what I like about that cover is that it's sexy enough,
right?
But it's not over the top, and
I don't want to do, you've got you've got a lot of Kickstarters where there's a lot of nudity, and I'm not really excited about getting in that space. I don't oppose it. I don't have a moral objection or anything, but I'm not sure. I want that to be my focus, because once that's your focus, that's what people are thinking of for you as a comic book creator. I want people to be thinking of the story first, and also that the art's good, but not that it's titillation. That's meant to be titillation.
But it's tricky on Kickstarter because I'm a big Zenescope fan, right? And I know.
Oh yeah, they do a lot of attractive women covers.
So I sell a lot of Zenescope books, and there's a reason why a $20 book goes for $60. It's a $250 print run, and then it's also very sexy. And I'm not even talking about the nude versions. The nude versions are out of my price range, where it's $100, and a nude version with Zenescope usually sells for about $180 to $190, but it costs $100, and that's not a great rate of return. That's a 45% rate of return, essentially over its cost.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, doubling my money, give or take, after it's all said and done. I'm maybe making like 60% on that book in profit, which is not great. Versus having a $20 book that I sell for $70 is a much greater rate of return. you
Right.
know. So, but at the same time, it's very suggestive. It's very sexy. But I feel with this cover in particular, it's enough of that where we could tell she's attractive. We can tell that
Yeah.
she's got some big boobs going on, but also it's not saying if this was on my dresser, my mom walked in, I would not be so concerned. If I had
Right.
a 13-year-old nephew, I would not be concerned. Some Zenoscope books, I might be a little concerned.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so it's fascinating finding the balance because that does bring in readers, though. And
Right.
it's tricky with Kickstarter because you need to figure out saying, hey, I'm capturing reader over here is coming for this cover because it's sexy and I like sexy girl covers. And then
Hmm.
you hope they stay for the story, but you do need to get funded. But you also want people to say, hey, I'm backing for the story. And figuring out that relationship is complicated, I feel.
Right. Yeah, we've had, I had, in fact, I was talking with Greg Bow about it, and we were talking about doing the not, whether to do the naughty or nice kind of covers, and I go back and forth about whether I'm interested in doing that kind of split, but
Yeah, it's tricky. It really is tricky to figure out what is the correct position. So I'm not going to go into details, but somebody made a suggestion to me on something. I'm like, oh, I'm not too sure if I should be interviewing OnlyFans models,
right,
for my show. Maybe interviewing somebody on Patreon who does comics who's big might make sense, but should I be interviewing a sex worker on my show? And it's that to me deals with integrity, it deals with ethic issues, and it deals with a lot of other things. And I'm still toying with the idea because
hmm,
I understand the potential, but I also say, look, how is that going to affect the perception of what everybody who's been with me for 10 years has viewed me as? How is that going to affect my perception of how, this show now operates? Where does it force the evolution of the show? And even
right,
when you start going naughty nice, how does that affect? Is this a cover Kickstarter and people grabbing your books because they like the covers? Or are
hmm,
they grabbing it for the story and when somebody sees your Kickstarter, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
right,
Because I don't know how you feel, but I'm a variant cover artist collector. So one of the things is that I sometimes don't even open up a book out of its
uh,
bag and board, and I don't read it. There's a bunch of Zenoscope stuff. I actually just started reading Zenoscope about 2.5 years ago.
right.
Before that, I was collecting them for about 4 years, and I was collecting the variants, and I didn't care about the story.
Yeah, I've never collected I used to collect comic books, but they were always comic books I was going to read. I'd read them, I'd bag them and board them, and I might even read them again. I was never looking at it as an investment or anything like that. Some I've saved because I thought maybe they'd be valuable too, but almost never did I buy a book thinking about its potential for value. And nowadays, I only read books that I want to read, and I barely bother to keep. If I'm fine getting them digitally if it's cheaper, or I'm fine reading them in trade paperback, or I'm fine getting them from the library. It's usually just entertainment. I'm not at all collecting.
Yeah, see, I'm
But
so different.
I'm fine to serve that market, though. If people want to get my books just to in the hopes that I become famous someday and that they'll be worth 50 times as much because I only printed a few hundred of the first edition. That's fine with me. I'm going to save a few of my books just in case I need them too. So
See, I'm so different, but I do read a lot of digital comics, and
mhm.
that's kind of where I'm at. But I do want to mention that obviously there's a lot of packages, so you get both JC Grande covers. You get basically any cover with the shark. I think you get any type of package with any type of the covers. I think that
Right.
you can get all like the Jaw stuff or a bunch of the Jaw covers from previous issues.
Yeah.
There's also a 19 Shark of War package, which I think is almost all of them, if not
Yeah, I think that's
all of
every
them.
every comic book I've ever printed, every version of the comic book cover I have, and some of them I may have to print a few extra because I'm not sure I have enough left of some of the first issue comic books. I may have to go back to the printer just for those. But yeah, those are I offer combinations of everything almost. I had somebody asking me, they'd already bought my first issue. I don't know if they bought it at a con or they bought it at earlier Kickstarter, and they only wanted the hard copies of issue 2 through 5, and I didn't have that. I was like, well, here I immediately made a reward tier for, I already have issue 1, so that they could have a reward tier that would get them the issues 2 through 5, because I really want I'm customer service oriented, and if there's a tier people want, I'm willing to provide it. Doesn't take much time to do, and I will always want more readers.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important. And obviously, and I've been saying this with a lot of people, putting people sort of on a spot a little bit sometimes on this show with Kickstarters. But if there's something somebody wants and you don't have it, or there's something that, they're like, hey, I need A, B, C, and D, and I'm pretty sure they could reach out to you and ask you to do it. So if somebody's a retailer, for instance, and they say, look, I need 10 copies of issue 1. I want 5 copies of issues 2, 3, 4, and 5, because that's what I think is going to work for my store.
I would love to do a retailer pack. I keep thinking about doing a retailer pack, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to sell any, so I haven't put one together yet, but I kind of keep thinking about doing it and wanting to do it. If I thought a retailer wanted to do something like that, I would do it in a minute. Yeah, I would definitely love to do a retailer pack for anybody. And I've toyed with doing it before, and maybe I'll try it soon. Now that I've got a full run, that you're not just, they wouldn't just get one book; they'd have a series, and they could sell that as a thing. So I've toyed with it, but I haven't done it yet.
Yeah, because and I'm sure if somebody wants some obscure package, and they're like, hey, look, I need A, B, C, and D, and I'm a shop, I'm sure that it can all be worked out, because Kickstarter is very personal. And I'm sure that they could message you or somehow get in contact with you. And I'm sure
I also have add-ons too, and stuff like that as well. So there's an add-ons menu after you back that gives you a whole bunch of other stuff, so you can tailor things. And for anybody who's total backing is $30, whether from rewards or add-ons, I also throw in a shark tooth necklace. Fossilized shark tooth necklace. I want to make that emphasize that it's a fossil, not a.
He goes and tracks down a shark every day. He negotiates with the shark. They have a contract, and Ben goes down in scuba gear and communicates with the shark, and they have a contract signing, and the shark signs his or her name, because we don't discriminate here, and then it all works out that everybody benefits. And this entire
the reason I make a point that it's a fossil, not a live shark tooth, is because sometimes those are gathered unethically, and I want anybody to know that if they're getting one of my shark tooth, it did not come from a living shark. It wasn't, no shark was killed or harmed in the making of that tooth. It's millions of years old. So I don't want anybody to feel that there's anything that environmentally incorrect about my shark teeth. They are ethically sourced.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff going on with your entire book and ethically sourced shark teeth, and I'm obviously joking around, so hopefully on us. I really don't want to deal with a PETA offense. It was not fun. I had a bunch of favors. No, PETA is great. But anyhow, I do want to give you a chance for self-promotion, because we've been talking for a while. You got a lot of stuff going on. This cover is fantastic, and everyone should go buy it. I am broke and poor, so I need to try to find money. Not making any promises, but I don't know what's going to happen. And broke and poor, and my Ethereum is not doing good, everybody. So
yeah, thanks. I sow.bitingcomics.com will take you directly to the Kickstarter. It's going on for a little more than 7 days. I think 8 days left. So I've got stretch goals going on right now. Everybody who backs the physical level is going to get 2 bookmarks. And right now, everybody who's backed, even at a digital level, is going to get at least 12 digital comic books, not just mine, but other people's that have, we formed our own little group, and, and so that I can give away other people's indie comic books as well. So for as little as $5, you get 12 books. $14, you get all of my digital books plus those books, so 18 books in total. So a lot of comics at a very reasonable price. We're going on to the after that, I'm going to have stretch goal where we're going to have magnets and other cool things for anybody who backs. I'm hoping to do a metal bookmark stretch goal. I'll be pushing it. Obviously the cost of metal bookmarks is more than some things, but so I have to make a certain stretch goal to offer that, but I'm hoping to. And of course, you can always get, my stuffed Nasher and a couple of smaller stuffed sharks if you like them. And anybody over $30 gets. Oh yeah, these are an interesting story. Anybody who gets my keychain, I got keychains. Anybody who buys the keychain also gets one of these clip-ons. The story behind them is that I was ordering keychains, and the vendor sent me those. And I'm like, what are these? And the vendor sent me the keychains and just told me to keep them. So I'm like, what do I do with them? I'm like, I'm going to give them to whoever backs me, buys my keychain as a bonus. So if you buy a keychain, you also get one of those little cupcake head things that you can clip onto your backpack or whatever else you have, or use it as a prank on somebody, I guess. But I have them. I'm going to use them in a constructive manner. So my vendor's loss is your gain.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, and obviously I've been saying it. I'm going to keep saying it. You have to support indie comics. Excuse me. And what that means is that you have to back Kickstarters when they're live. Whether you're pledging $1, $5, digital, physical, or whatever you can pledge if you can. It goes a long way. Furthermore, you have to share it out. Sharing out on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I don't know what other social media platforms there are at this point, but I think those are the main four. And every share can potentially mean a new backer. It could potentially mean a new person looking at it, or they can then share it out and it gets it out further. So that is very, very important to do. And if you do back this project, let people know that you backed it and put it into a Facebook group saying, hey, I just backed Shark of War issue 5. You should back it too because it's an awesome book. Or look at this cover. It's awesome. I picked up this cover. Maybe you should pick it up too, because it goes a long way and it's a big deal and it's very helpful. And, shares are just as important as money, and sometimes they're even more important because algorithms and social media is not what it used to be. And so it's very, very important to understand that and fully utilize that. As far as I'm concerned, obviously I got my t-shirt. That's one way how to support this show. Another way how to support this show is buying my metal card on eBay or buying anything from my eBay store. If you are interested in comics and looking for rare comics and key issues and things like that, I got a bunch of books up there. And if you're looking for a particular book and you might think I have it, because I got about 50 Zenescope books that I got to put up there, there's a good chance I have it. Or if you're looking for Pop Funkos, there's a good chance I have it. And if I have an extra one or I'm willing to sell it, I got no problem selling it to you. Also, I buy me a coffee. I do sometimes have corporate sponsors, and sometimes I do not. I am a fan-driven show. I ran a Kickstarter in January. So I appreciate everybody who says, hey, I'm $35. It's in the description up above. And I also, given that I got to play this and we're going to sort of time ourselves out, my friends over at Cowabunga Comics have something really cool, which I'm going to play right now for everybody to enjoy. So go buy from Cowabunga Comics online. And I got a bunch of cool stuff. You're going to see some of their merch. And so we're going to be back in 30 seconds. And now that I got paid for that ad, I'm going to let you have the final word and take us out.
Thank you. My name is Ben Lacy. My comic book is Shark of War, issues 1 through 5. It is a complete story, so you'll get an entire epic story. sow.bitingcomics.com will take you right to the Kickstarter. So you don't even have to search for the whole Kickstarter, just sow.bitingcomics.com. Thank you.
And everybody, that is a wrap.